Hi, welcome to SBR Videos. I'm Peter Loshak. This is our weekly totals rundown that we do for the NFL professional sports bettor Teddy Covers. Right now it's Friday afternoon before the Sunday for NFL Week 14. Teddy Covers, there's really only one totals play that I thought that I was really liking, when the lines came out, and that was the over 43 in Jets, Tennessee. The Jets have an offense that is, usually reasonably productive, and Tennessee with Mariota going, I'm always expecting a reasonable offensive performance for them. 43 is not a particularly high total in the NFL. Over 43 in Jets, Tennessee. What do you think?
It's not one that I would talk you out of, but it's not one that I have a particularly strong opinion favoring. And look, I know that Tennessee hung 42 on Jacksonville last week, but that's been the exception rather than the rule. Again, particularly on the road, we see them at Houston get shut down. At Jacksonville, they got shut down. It's a hit or miss type offense. There are weeks that it goes, and the Jags defense is a heck of a lot weaker than the Jets defense in many different regards. And the Jets offense is kind of the same way. When Chris Ivory gets going, the Jets get going. I like Fitzpatrick as an upgrade over everyone the Jets have had at the quarterback position in recent years. And certainly the Decker-Marshall combination has provided, a ton of downfield options for Fitzpatrick. And the Jets, in theory, should get there here. But at the same time, the Titans, they've been much better than expected defensively this year. And if you look at Tennessee's weaknesses, they've all been on the offensive side of the ball. So it's not a game that jumps out at me as being an overplay, but it's certainly not one that I would try to talk you out of. The total, as you mentioned, in a very reasonable range.
Yeah. And then one game that I'm sure everyone is scratching their heads about is Pitt, Cincinnati. Right now, each of these teams can easily get into the 30s with no problem when their offense starts clicking. Very high total in this game, as you would expect. It's 49, but the last time these two teams met, also a very high total. That one had a final score of 16-10, went way, way under. Some people, a few of our very astute commenters on YouTube actually called that one. They said it was going to be a low-scoring game, and they liked the under. What do you think about the rematch? Another, surprisingly low-scoring game, or do you think it'll be more in line with where the market is pricing their total?
Well, let's talk about that first meeting between these two teams, because I think Pittsburgh's defense, they've been so spotty. There are weeks where they look great.
Yeah.
And we saw last week against Indy where that defense was dominant throughout. It's a defense that's loaded with quickness. And then that came, of course, on the heels of a game where they got absolutely torched by Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. They gave up 39 points and, couldn't get off the field on third down and couldn't get red zone stops. And it's been that hit or miss from Pittsburgh's defense, particularly against the better passing teams they face. I remember Derek Carr lighting them up in the fourth quarter in Pittsburgh, less than a month ago. And that's happened often enough this season to make me concerned about the Steelers' ability to stop the better passing attacks that they face. And this Cincy offense, they were awful. They really played bad football in the first meeting. They were flat. They didn't bring their A game. Dalton was missing open receivers. We didn't really see Jeremy Hill get going in that contest. And he's been a monster the last couple of weeks in terms of yards after contact. He had, I think, 75 to 95 yards after contact last week, breaking tackles. And when Cincy is running the football effectively, their downfield passing game is solid on a consistent basis. It is a potent offense, and the reason that they struggled in the first meeting had a lot to do with Andy Dalton just not being on his game. Don't know that happens in both of these meetings. You look at the other end of the equation, Cincy's defense is elite, but that first meeting was the first game back off the injury from Ben Roethlisberger. And I'm telling you, Roethlisberger was awful in that game. He threw 3 picks. He missed open receivers. He was tentative in the pocket. If you've watched Big Ben play the last couple of weeks, really since that game, Pittsburgh 30 against Cleveland, 38 against Oakland, 30 against Seattle, despite all those field goals and turnovers, and then 45 last week against Indy. This is a Steelers offense that I think is as good as any in the NFL right now. And the only way I'm looking to bet Pittsburgh's games is to bet them up and over the total. That's the way I'd look here.
Okay, makes sense. And then I want to ask you again. We talked about the Pats and Houston in the ATS rundown segment of our call this week. I want to ask you about the total for this game. It's I think it's 44.5 now. It's taken a hit down. The Pats, despite having all those issues on offense last week, still that game against the Eagles went way over. I know there were some fluky points, but still went way over. And then in the Houston Buffalo game, that was one of the winners I had last week. I really like the over in that one. It did go over, and I'm wondering if maybe maybe the over might not be another good play here. The Pats just seem like one way or another they're going to find a way to put up some points on the board. And their pass defense is the weakness of the team. Houston has a pass offense that can be productive. Maybe one way or another, both these teams get to 21 and it sneaks over. What do you think?
I'm not betting the Patriots over the total now. And they've cashed 3 overs in the last 4 weeks. And I'll call them all fluky. Certainly last week's game's fluky. You can't even,
Sure.
Philly scores 3 non-offensive touchdowns. And then they play prevent defense and then let the Patriots dink and dunk their way down the field. So you can make a case that 5 of those touchdowns last week were, somewhat fraudulent because New England had 14 early and then they didn't score again until after they were way down. And the Eagles were playing no quick strike type of offense or defense against them. But New England is not an over team right now, not by any stretch of the imagination. This offense is built to dink and dunk. Brady's lost his best pass catching weapons. And there's been talk, Gronkowski was able to practice yesterday. There's some talk that he might even suit up this week. If Gronk suits up, this total is going to go through the roof. The total will go up at least a point or two. And I like the under even more because I'm not convinced he'll be anywhere near 100%. And New England right now, they have to run the football. They have to rely on a short, controlled passing game, which Tom Brady does very well. But this is not a team poised for big, quick strike TDs. And neither are the Texans, for that matter.
Right.
You're betting on Brian Hoyer. You're betting on a team that needs to run the football. You're betting on a team that is in playoff contention only because their defense has been good throughout the course of the season. They went through an 18-quarter stretch in which they allowed a grand total of 2 touchdowns on the defense side of the football prior to last week against Buffalo. And I would not sell this Texans defense short. Lean under in this one.
All right, awesome thoughts, Teddy Covers. I think we touched on 3 interesting totals from NFL Week 14. Is there anything else that you think is worth mentioning?
Yeah, let's go to Lambeau Field for the late game on Sunday. Not the Sunday night game, but the Sunday afternoon game. There's only a couple of those this week, as it's a very heavy early schedule and very little late. But Packers and Cowboys. And we think of Green Bay as being this high-flying offense that march up and down the field. Not this year. Green Bay has been an under machine this season. And a lot of it has to do with the weakness that they have at wide receiver. And,
and also a lot of it, sorry, I don't mean to cut you up, but a lot of it also has to do with the posted totals for their games. This one is not like that, 42.5. I mean, if you're looking, I've been betting on a lot of those Packers unders, but this one I haven't pulled the trigger on at all. 42.5 makes me nervous to take an under right now in this one.
Sure, the markets have adjusted, but have you looked at the weather forecast for Green Bay on Sunday?
No.
It is going to be rainy, wet, and nasty. And guess what? We've seen it's not going to be that cold, which makes me think that Dallas may have a shot from a side perspective. They didn't want Dallas with the temperature,
right.
Not with Matt Castle at center. But when it comes to the nasty field, we saw a nasty field against Chicago. Packers offense didn't work. We saw a nasty field against Detroit. Packers offense didn't work. We saw a nasty field against Carolina. Packers offense didn't work. With a limited receiving core and conditions that don't benefit those receivers, it's dink and dunk right now for Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers has 2 completions of longer than 25 yards the last 3 weeks. And all the talk this week is, we're going to pound Eddie Lacy between the tackles. We're going to pound Eddie Lacy between the tackles. That's what I expect. Look at Matt Castle. Matt Castle can't throw downfield. He can't. He's not capable of doing it. Dallas, their offense is dink and dunk. And all we hear out of Dallas this week is, we're going to pound Darren McFadden. We're going to pound Darren McFadden. 2 teams that want to run first, lousy weather, iffy offenses, solid defenses. 42.5 is reasonable. I'll take the Pack and the Cowboys under the number.
Awesome analysis, Teddy Covers. That's also making me like Dallas a lot more than I was at first. It was only a very slight lead. Now I'm starting to think that maybe that might be a decent play. Teddy Covers, thanks so much as always, and we will talk to you next week for our totals rundown for NFL Week 15.
I look forward to it, Peter. Have a great weekend. Best of luck to all of you out there in viewerland.